Welcome to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware.
Hi, I'm Lisa Garr, host of The Aware Show. And for anyone who's ever experienced the sudden loss of a loved one, you know the feeling of what it feels like to be blindsided by grief. And this story is for many who really felt the loss of Dr. Wayne Dyer. August 30th, 2015, I remember where I was. I was on the pier in Santa Monica, and I remember getting a phone call from a friend, and I just could not believe that someone that was such a good friend and so full of life and vibrancy was instantly gone. Anyone who's ever been impacted by grief asks all of the right questions. Why? You bargain with the situation. You're in denial of the situation. You think you want to know what happened. You would trade places, all of the things that go through your mind. But imagine what it was like for his 8 children. His 8 children, their life was centered around Wayne because he was such a fabulous dad. Not only was he a teacher to all of us, but a teacher to his 8 children through all of the examples that he had in his life and all of the fun that he had and all of the laughter that he had. And I believe still has, because I feel his presence very, very much so in my life. Joining me are 2 of his daughters, Saje Dyer and Serena Dyer Pisoni, and they found comfort in rediscovering their dad's teachings as a way of allowing Dr. Wayne Dyer's teaching to come through with their new book called The Knowing. And it carries on Wayne's teachings for generations to come and their knowledge of what they learned as a result of being raised in the interactive lifestyle of Dr. Wayne Dyer and his family. So welcome both. Serena, hello.
Hi, thank you.
And Saje, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. So happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so grateful that you did this so that Wayne's teachings can, of course, be for generations, and his voice can be for generations to come, but also your own teachings of what you learned through your experience of growing up with your dad. We had the pleasure of hanging out with you on a Hay House cruise once. So tell me a little bit about, first of all, when you think back on your dad, and Serena, I'll start with you. What is the number one thing that you remember, you feel his essence? What is the essence that you feel from your father?
Joy, without a doubt. First thing that comes to mind, and the strongest, is joy. He had a reverence for children, both he and my mom did. And part of that reverence was for the way children are in the moment, are in awe. A balloon, a butterfly, a rainbow, they are in awe of life and of all the things in this world. And children naturally tend to default to joy, to laughter, to silliness. And that was, I say all the time, my dad was just one big kid. And he really was. And when I think about him, I think about how much fun he was to be around. And you guys were friends, so you know, he was just always a joke, a wisecracking remark, laughing at himself, poking fun at himself, telling funny stories. That's who he was. And I think of him as so joyful. And I still feel that he is, though. I still feel like he's still kind of pulling pranks and, messing with us. So it's still a present feeling. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Saje, what is the essence that you feel the most when you think of your father?
I have to say that I would have said the same thing that Serena said, just joy and love and fun. I mean, I remember when I would be around my dad, it was like addicting. I would have to leave. I want to go to the gym, or I need to go make a phone call, whatever it is. And I wouldn't want to leave. I'd find myself making excuses to stay longer. I mean, his voicemail, for as long as I can remember on his cell phone was, this is Wayne Dyer that you've reached, and I want to feel good. And if your
Yes.
message is designed to do anything else, you've reached the wrong number.
He said, call
And he-
Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
Yes, I sometimes leave that part out, and perhaps you should call Dr. Phil. But he really embodied that. He just wanted to feel good, and he wanted everyone around him to feel good. And you always did. I mean, being in his presence was like being in joy, high vibrations, things were fun and light. And I always felt supported and loved.
It was a constant discovery, a constant learning being around
That as
him
well.
because of his zest and curiosity for the moment and for life.
Mhm.
And he did anything for you all. I mean, he loved you all and loves you all so much. And I know that he would never have wanted you to go through the pain that you have had to endure as a result of his sudden loss. And I love that you have added his words on paper through your eyes so that you can have his words last forever. But tell me how initially you coped with the news and initially how you got together as a family, because I think that's really, really important. And Serena, I'll start with you.
So I was actually on the phone with his assistant Dee when it was discovered that he had passed. So I was listening to that live. I was in Florida at my mom's house with almost all of our family gathered together to celebrate Sky and Summer, two of our sisters' birthdays. And when they finally got into his hotel room and his assistant Dee, who's a good friend of mine, started yelling, "Oh no, oh God, oh Wayne," and she dropped the phone, I knew in that instant that I knew that he was gone, but I also didn't know, if that makes sense. It was like I knew on a soul level, but my human, more superficial level couldn't even begin to understand. I didn't start crying. I didn't break down. I didn't even shed a tear. I just remember feeling like I was having a moment where I could see myself receiving the news, but I couldn't process the news. And then a police officer got on the phone with me and said, "Ma'am, what is your relationship to the deceased?" And
Oh.
I said, "Who is deceased?" And he said, "I'm sorry, I thought you knew." And I just handed the phone to my mom because I couldn't even process that. So I would say that my first reaction, like a lot of people that get a call that the person you talked to the day before, who you never thought was going to die because they were larger than life, I was in a state of total shock. The first thing I did was call Sage, actually. And I'll let Sage tell you about that.
Yeah. I had just gotten back 48 hours or less from Australia, traveling with my dad through Australia and New Zealand. He was giving full day lectures every couple of days, and he was so full of life. And so I had just returned from that trip. He returned to Hawaii. I returned to New York. I knew I was very jet lagged and not expecting this call at all. I knew that Serena was with my entire family and that they were having dinner. So I was with my then boyfriend, now husband. And when I saw her phone, her name coming up on my phone, I thought, that's odd because they're all together. And I wasn't going to answer because I hadn't seen my boyfriend in so long, but I something in me recognized that it was odd that she was calling me. I picked up the phone and she said, "Sage, are you alone?" And I said, "No, I'm with Anthony." And she said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "I don't know why." I could tell that something was going on. And she said, "Dad doesn't have a pulse." And I said, "What do you mean Dad doesn't have a pulse? What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Dad doesn't have a pulse." And it started to process in my mind what she was saying. And I dropped the phone. I mean, unlike Serena, I immediately processed it. And I dropped the phone and the tears started streaming. And Anthony then came over and said, "What's going on?" And I couldn't speak and I just couldn't breathe. My whole world was crumbling around me. And then he picked up the phone because he could hear Serena shouting from the phone. And he spoke to her. And then part of me, at one point, I recognized, well, he doesn't have a pulse. Maybe they're giving him a pulse because she worded it that way. It's an odd way to put it. And so I came to and I said, are they working on him? What's going on? Like, what's happening? And he said, I'm so sorry, your dad passed away.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the,
Yeah,
and the
I
reason
could
I didn't. Oh,
feel
sorry.
it
Go
right
ahead.
now. Again, no, that's okay. But yeah, it was a lot. It was, I had, you know, I lived a very beautiful, easygoing life up until that point, and it still is a beautiful life. But that was the first real life heartbreak that happened to me, and it hit me all at once.
Yes,
And
I mean,
I'm sitting in my father's home right now, so
yeah.
you know, I feel it in different ways. Just picturing being with him here so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and his essence, it feels like is still there, and that you had that time. Both of you were in Australia, New Zealand with him, right? Both.
I was
No.
not. Sky
Yeah.
was our other sister. Yeah, I had a 5-month-old at the time, so I wasn't with him on that trip. But the reason I said he doesn't have a pulse is because in hindsight, I couldn't say the words. I
Right.
couldn't
Yeah.
say those words. And I think it's also why I said, "Are you sitting down?" I mean, it's like something from a movie. And in my, what I would never in my life say, "Are you sitting down?" That's like what people say in movies. But
Right.
in my mind, I was having this not real experience, almost like I was reciting things that I thought I should say because I wasn't processing it. But I will say, to answer the second part of your question, we called Tracy, our oldest sister then. Our brother Sans was in Nicaragua with his friend at the time, and took a little while to get in touch with them. And then my mom had to break the news to him. And I would say within 24 hours of finding out, we were all together in Florida. And we all came together, and that was the greatest comfort, was that even though this was so painful, we had each
Each
other.
other. You
And we
had each
still
other.
do. Yeah, and we still do.
Yeah, I mean, it is a beautiful thing to ask, are you sitting down? Because you still were taking care of your sister. And I'm sure that's, of course, the way your dad raised you, is to love and to take care of each other. And that will always last in you. And as you now, between all of you, have 17 grandchildren,
Yes.
that legacy will continue, is to learn how to love
Mhm.
and to take care of each other, because family lasts forever. And it doesn't necessarily, as we know, and as your father taught for so many years, about the light, and about that our bodies are just temporarily housing our souls and our spirits. And all that he taught was, looking back, almost preparing us for the fact that you don't actually need a body to connect and to communicate. If
Mhm.
anyone could do that, it would be your dad. If there was any strong enough spirit and soul that knew how to come back down and touch into his loved ones, it would be Wayne Dyer.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I mean, I agree. I think that he absolutely was excited to be able to connect and to reach others from the other side, because he talked about his excitement for the next phase, or the next great adventure. But I also think that because he and our mom raised us to be open-minded, we, from the beginning, I mean, we were really raised on the idea that the soul lives on, that the soul is just having a temporary human experience in this body, but that it goes on. And so I think that because they raised us to know that and to believe that, we started looking for the signs. We started asking for the messages from day one. And I know a lot of people who have lost someone and they've never had a sign, and they've never gotten a message. And I think it might be because um, they're not really open to it. And for us, it wasn't really a choice.
You were raised that way.
And
Yes.
we've never
Yeah.
really contemplated anything else.
Well, I have to say though, actually, for me, it's not that I contemplated something else, but I was raised the same, you know, upbringing that Serena had, around these principles that my dad spoke about all the time, around experiences that are probably not the norm for other people. I mean, our parents had mediums coming over, channeling my grandma at times, and just things that are probably outside the norm. But I would say that I grew up both a believer in the things my dad taught about, but also a skeptic, and also somebody who just, it didn't apply to yet. You know, I had never lost somebody that I was very close to, that I was looking for out there. So I was, you know, it didn't apply to me. And when I heard about it, I thought, well, but do you really, you know, do you really feel my grandma, you know, in the room? Or things like that. And when my dad passed away, I felt like I was at a crossroads, or a place where I had to choose which way I was going to go. Was I going to see this as the end, the final? Never, I will never see my dad again. I mean, I was filled with thoughts of all the should haves and could haves, and only if I had only been there. If he had had this heart attack when we were in Australia, I could have called 911. And so I was just filled with fear-based thoughts. And there was a point for me where I had to choose to change those to love-based thoughts. And when I did that, and it was early on, it was in the first couple weeks after he passed, but I just started to sometimes choose to believe that he was with me. And then I started to experience him with me. And I started to experience signs and synchronicities, and really miraculous events took place for me. But it wasn't until I chose to be open to them, and to go down that path, and to close off this other path of, he's gone, I'll never see him again, I'll never call him again.
That is a brilliant teaching right there, is your willingness to be open. And I do know, there was, when the sudden loss happens, it doesn't matter if it's sudden or not sudden, the ability to connect is overridden by the pain of it, and that human desire to want to touch and hold and feel. But that you were able to go up into that place of choosing love, and where he always taught love is the connection, and light to light, really. Love and light go together. And when you finally made that choice, that's a really wonderful teaching for other people, to say, look, just try to choose love in the micro moments of your life. And what it could do is raise your frequency high enough so that those that are departed can lower their frequency low enough to match where our highest love will be. Because it feels like it is, I'd love for you to share some of the synchronicities that have happened as a result of you raising that vibration, or the experiences that you've heard, either you or Serena, where your dad really has miraculously shown up.
Well,
we could both share some.
Give you a couple examples. So actually, the day that he passed away, after being at my mom's house with everybody, and finally going home with my husband and my infant daughter at the time, we finally headed home. And when we got home, I said I just wanted to be alone, and I went up to my bedroom. And when I did that, that's when I really lost it. That's when it really kind of hit me, and I started to cry and sob. And I said out loud, if everything that you taught is real, if we really are a spiritual being, and this is a temporary experience, and the soul lives on, then I'm going to need a big sign, because otherwise I'm not going to believe you. And I was laying there on the bed, and I was expecting like light bulbs to flicker, or like, the fan to start spinning or something, and nothing was happening. But I had this thought that I knew it wasn't mine. It was almost like I heard it in my own head, but it wasn't my thought, because I had never done this before. And this voice said, listen to his podcast. And so I was like, okay, so I go on my phone, and I didn't even know there was an app on my phone called podcast. I had never.
This was 6 years ago. They weren't as big of a thing back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had listened to Serial. There was a Serial podcast, but I think that was even after he passed away. Anyway, I typed in podcast on my phone, and this little app popped up that was podcast. I opened it, and I typed in Wayne Dyer, and I clicked on the first one that came up, and I pushed play, and it played for about 15 minutes. And it was my dad talking to a young man who had called in, and he was talking about his mother who had stage 4 cancer. And I thought it was really comforting to hear his voice, but it was also really painful, because it was a reminder that I was never going to hear his voice in person, live. It was, all of that was done. And so I thought it was nice to hear his voice, and it was nice to hear his advice, but it was very painful at the same time. And so at the very end, I'm getting ready to, the music is coming on to end his podcast, and I'm getting ready to hit end. And at the last 15 seconds, he says, and for everybody listening right now, if you could take a moment and send my daughter Serena some love, because she is going through a hard time. And then it ended. And
Oh.
I just started crying and laughing. And I said out loud, I said, I can't believe you pulled it off. And I kept saying, pulled it off, because in my mind, he was never going to die. And it was something he talked about with open excitement. And I didn't think it was ever going to happen. And I couldn't believe that here I was and it was happening. And I couldn't believe that he actually did it, that he actually died. But for me, that was the first moment where I knew that I could receive signs and messages if I did not stay attached to getting them the way that I thought I should get them, like the light bulbs flickering or the fan going off. That if I just paid attention to that little voice, or to the little nudges, or to the little like synchronistic moments, that would be enough. But I have more, but I'll let Sage say one too if you want.
Yes, I would love it.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
just to comment on that, that silence that you were in is a wonderful way of being able to listen as well. That's a really, really wonderful point.
Yeah. Well, and I think that so often we get caught up in this idea that the sign needs to come in the way, the time, the package that I expect it to.
Mhm.
And so because we have such an attachment to the outcome or to the box that it comes in, we, I think, can miss so much.
Yes.
We're not paying attention to what is, but we're focused on what we think it ought to be like, or should become, or should happen in the form of. And I think that that can be really misleading.
Yes, yes. Sage, do you have an experience that you could share with us?
Yeah, there were so many early on.
Yeah.
And when I made that choice to start to be open to them, to believe wholeheartedly that my dad was still with me, just in another form, and that it was now up to me to tune into that, I started to receive. Yeah, so there were so many in the early days that he passed, so many signs, and they started once, like I said, I chose to tune into them and to be open to them and to choose to believe and to know that he was still with me, just in a different form, and that it was now up to me to tune in. His last text messages to me were really profound, and but we write about a lot of that in the book. The one that I want to share right now was, so I had been in Australia and New Zealand with my dad on a Hay House tour. So Hay House paid for this trip. And because Sky and I were part of the show, Sky was singing and I would speak with my dad for about 20 minutes and tell a story. They paid for our trip, and they paid for us to be in first class, which was an incredible experience on these planes flying international. The seats turn into beds, and it's champagne, and it's all the delicious gourmet food, pajamas, everything you could want on a plane. And we didn't want these flights to end. And our dad, I had never flown this way before, but my dad was more used to it. And he, on this trip, it became, he would tease us all the time. He loved to tease us about this first class treatment. He would say, don't get used to this, this is a one-time thing. Or he'd look over on the flight, oh, are you enjoying your movies and your steak and your champagne? And don't get used to this. And my brother-in-law paid for his own way on the trip because he wasn't part of the show. And he was in coach, and my dad also loved to tease him about his lack of first class. Anyway, it became a theme of the trip. And one thing that I learned on this trip is that my dad always wanted to be in seat 2B, and his travel agent knew to, if that seat was available, seat 2B, be like boy, to seat him in that seat. And he just wanted to sit there so that he could make the joke, am I in seat 2B or not to be? Because he was a dork and he liked dorky jokes like that. So I learned that about him on this trip, and he was in seat 2B on, I think, every single flight that it was available. And so after my dad passed, Serena and I, well, my whole family flew out to Maui actually a few days later, because that's where he was when he passed. And we all just felt really called to be there. Even though we did the celebration of life in Florida, we still wanted to be out there. It felt like we all needed to get there as soon as possible. Serena and I booked flights a day earlier than the rest of our family. And Serena called me the night before the flight and said, you know what, Sage, I just decided to upgrade to first class because I'm so exhausted. I'm flying. She was flying with her 6-month-old or 5-month-old. And
On my lap. Yeah.
On her lap. So she
Yeah.
said, me and her and Matt decided to upgrade to first class. And she said it wasn't very expensive. There's a lot of seats left. You should do it. You should upgrade too. And I said, no, no, no. I don't want to spend the money. And I also knew that she wanted me in first class near her so she could pawn her baby off on me the whole time. And I was like, I am so exhausted. I haven't slept. I really wasn't sleeping well. I said, I could sleep standing up right now. I'm not going to, it would be a waste. And so I didn't do it. And we got to the airport in the morning, and Serena and Matt checked in on their reservation. We were on different reservations. And she's like taunting me with her ticket. Oh, you're going to be in coach. You sure you don't want to upgrade? Last chance. And I was like, get away from me. I'd be happy in my seat in the back. And so I go up, I check in, all that. She types on the computer, and the woman hands me my ticket, and she says, enjoy first class. And I look at her and I'm like, what? And I looked at Serena. I'm like, did you do this? And I was like, should I say something? Or maybe this was a mistake. I'm not going to say anything. And I walk away from the desk and I look at my ticket, and I was in seat 2B.
Oh.
And I just knew in that moment that somehow my dad had arranged this for me. And it was bigger than getting a first class seat. Tears started streaming down my face because I felt like he was saying to me, one thing that I thought so much about in those early days was that I was only 25. I was still in school. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I felt like there was so much that I still needed my dad there for. Not that you're ever ready to lose your parents, but it just felt like he left at a critical time in my life where I still really needed him. And I felt like he was saying, I'll always take care of you. Sorry.
Yes.
And I'm still taking care of you. And it was a really
Yes.
powerful moment for me. There was no other explanation for that upgrade, by the way. We were flying on Virgin America. I had never flown on that airline before. I had no status with them or anything like that.
And I did not pay for her to go first class.
Right. We checked the credit cards. I was never
Yeah.
charged.
And we have
Wow.
different last names. So because I'm married, I changed my name. So we weren't even on the same reservation, and we have different last names. So
Yeah.
they put us together, thinking she was supposed to be graded as well. It was just a total miracle.
It is, and you're knowing enough to look for it, which is so
Right.
beautiful. I have to share a little story with you. I told my daughter, who we spent some time together in the Hay House cruise, and I had family dinner with your whole family and Wayne, and I don't know if you remember this. This is a while ago, and Kayla, our daughter, was still young, and Sage, you sat with her and you gave her a blue butterfly ring that you were wearing.
Okay.
And
I think that
it was a
me.
little, was it you, Serena?
It was the Caribbean cruise.
Yes.
Yes, that was
Yeah,
me.
that was
yeah.
Serena.
You
Me.
gave
Yeah.
her the blue butterfly ring.
Yeah.
So she was terrified she had lost it. And we just found it. She was packing to go to college, and she came to me and she said, Mom, is this the blue butterfly ring that
Oh my gosh.
I got on the
Wow.
Hay House cruise from Wayne's daughter? And I said, that is so amazing. I'm just interviewing them this week.
Wow.
That is-
But
and his
this is
favorite-
even better. Just prior to that, she had gotten her nails done and she got a blue butterfly on her nail.
Oh my God.
Wow.
That's
And I know
amazing.
your dad's connection to the blue butterflies.
Well, and his favorite color is purple, and I see she's got purple nails, and that's a purple butterfly on
And the
the ring.
butterfly is purple.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful synchronicity. So he's still hanging in there. I mean, he is still not hanging in there. Your dad is thriving, I believe,
I agree.
in
Yeah.
many ways. And so what I've learned, and what I learned from reading your book, and all of the beautiful teachings that you bring forward, is really the knowing is about this knowing, starting from the place of knowing that it is possible to have connection through a place of incredible love. And if we weren't even looking for that sign. I mean,
Right.
Kayla was packing and found this ring and happened to have gotten her nails done earlier with the blue butterfly on it. And then we were interviewing you, and it was just all these butterflies.
Right. But you know what I think? I think that's exactly right. You don't even have to be looking for them. Like you just said, when you are in sync, when you are in flow with love, with joy, with God, with goodness, the universe can't help but give you all green lights and all the God winks and all the synchronicities and the alignments and the coincidences, which really is, divine connection. Because when you are coming from that place, when you are operating from that space, that energy, um, the universe can't help but match it. And that's why, you know, one of the things that Sage and I have often done when we sign a book for somebody is to say, love and all green lights, because that's something our dad used to say all the time. I send you all green lights, because green lights are what you get when, you know, you're just driving down the road and it's like you just hit every green and you're so excited because, like, you know, you're just, I got another green and another green, and you don't have to stop, you don't have to break, because you're just in the flow with life.
Yeah.
And I
just go. Yes,
yeah,
it's green
Yeah.
as go.
yeah,
Absolutely. And also the quality of life that your father lived in terms of his commitment to learning, curiosity, being such a great human to so many people. So many people loved and still love Wayne. And I'm saying this because as we are alive in our lives, and no matter what struggles we're going through, I mean, he was raised in an orphanage and had this huge ordeal with finding his father, as you'll read through his several books, that he chose the higher path all the time. He stopped to talk to people on the street. He had, everyone felt like they were his friend and would listen to people's stories. And it didn't matter if they were crossing him in the airport, if it was the Strand there in Maui. And for us who lost loved ones, I've also lost my father, and he was an amazing, amazing surgeon and helped so many people's lives, that I just know by living a life that's committed to service, that's committed to integrity, that's committed to curiosity and your higher self, that it's possibly easier to connect on the other side because you already are experiencing that frequency of love.
well,
Your father, he did the most, I'm sorry, just the most generous
yeah.
thing. I think the forward to my book that he wrote was one of the last forwards he's ever written. And he called me when you were all together to read me the foreword. And I was sitting in this very chair and I literally broke down in tears because he saw me for something that I couldn't have even seen myself for. When he wrote that forward, I couldn't even, it still brings me to tears because he was able to see people in the purest of forms. And those, to commit a life to that level of quality is a really admirable thing to do. What were you going to say, Serena?
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, I love that, and I'm sure he loved that you were so moved by that. I was gonna say that he passed away in August of 2015, and about 10 months before that, right before Christmas of 2017. Sorry, he passed away 2015, so Christmas of 2014.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had sent each of us a copy, each of his children a copy of the DVD that he had recorded with Esther Hicks. Esther Hicks, I'm sure you're familiar.
Oh, I was there. Yeah.
Okay, so he sent us all the DVD and said, if you would like to get any Christmas money, because we didn't get Christmas presents, we were all old enough, but we just wanted money. He said, if you want to get any Christmas money, each of you has to watch this DVD and write me a letter about what was the most impactful thing that you got out of this recording. And this is typical dad thing to do. And I wrote my letter. So this is just less than a year before he passed away. I wrote my letter telling him that the most meaningful thing, the most significant thing that I got from that DVD was hearing Abraham describe how when Esther Hicks lost her husband, Jerry, and she was not able to connect with him, which, as somebody that can channel beings, it was particularly alarming and distressing for her. And it only compounded the grief that she was experiencing. She felt a sense of despair. And it was through really her spirit guides, Abraham, that she channels, that she was reminded that if she wanted to be in communication with Jerry, I wrote to my dad, that she had to become like what it was she was seeking. And she had to remember that where Jerry was a place of divine love, of pure joy. And when she is in the energy of despair, she cannot connect to the energy of pure love because they just don't meet on the same plane. Once she remembered that and she began to contemplate him from the place of love and joy, she felt him and heard him and was reconnected with him instantly. And I wrote my letter exactly about that. So when my dad passed, I had an understanding that if I wanted to stay connected to him, if I wanted to get the signs and the messages, I had to become like where he was, like the energy that he was. I had to elevate myself. That doesn't mean I didn't experience grief or pain or sadness or fear or any of those things. I did. But I knew that I also could come from the place of love and of joy and of peace. And I knew that I could do that just by thinking of him in those really happy, funny ways. And it was a work in progress, and it still is. But you touched on that a little bit before, so I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I could add to that also.
Yes, please, please.
It reminds me of a time that I was with my dad, and he was doing one of his dad lessons as well. And we were in the car, and the song "I Hope You Dance" by Leanne Womack came on the radio. And if you haven't heard that song, it's full of cliche, beautiful lines. I hope you never fear those mountains in the distance. And if you get the chance to sit it out or dance, I hope you dance. A beautiful song. And when it came on, my dad said, "Oh, I just love this song." And he said, "Let's turn it up." And then he said to me, "I want you to listen to every line in this song. And I agree with every single one except for one. And I want you to see if you can figure out which one I would disagree with." And so we listened to the song, and I don't remember if I got it right or not, but afterwards we talked about how the one line that he would not agree with is when she says, "I hope you never settle for the path of least resistance." And he said, "Because you should always be taking the path of least resistance. When the universe is offering you resistance, it's for a reason." And it got me thinking, it's this idea of surrendering to your life as it is rather than as you think it should be. You begin to process life as it is. And when you do that, rather than processing, well, I'll be happy when, X, Y, and Z down the road, processing life the way you think it should be, you're not living in this moment. You're not truly experiencing your life now. You experience the moment, and you can experience joy at any time. And it taught me to recognize when the universe is offering me resistance to stop, to pause, and to ask why, and to just be open to the idea that maybe I'm pushing for something that isn't meant to be. And let's look at other options. Let's process this as it is now. Surrender to your current circumstances and find joy here, because joy is not a destination down the road. It's always here.
Yeah. And just to go on what Sage said, I just have to jump in on that, because that became the single greatest, most difficult lesson for me to really understand, because in the period of time right before my dad, so I had a period of time starting in 2015 where every single aspect of my life changed for what I perceived to be the worst. My husband was indicted. All of our assets were frozen. My dad passed away. I unexpectedly got pregnant again. I had trouble losing weight from those pregnancies, so I had body image issues. My husband was then sentenced to 7 years in prison for this white collar related crime that he was convicted on the one count for. And then right after that, my stepson that my husband had raised as a single parent his entire life passed away at the age of 19 from an accidental drug overdose when he was visiting his mom for the first time in years. And so it was a lot, everything that you could imagine. One of those things would be enough to bring you to your knees, but I had them and I felt like they wouldn't stop coming. And I really started to think that, like, I could be happy, I could be healthy, I could be all the things my dad talked about. I could be abundant and joyful when all these circumstances in my life fall into place. When all of this is over, then I will be peaceful. When all of this is over, then I'll lose weight. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll be, doing this or that. But I knew, I was raised to know, and I knew that it was the other way around. That I will be peaceful, and then all of the pieces in my life will fall into place. But I didn't want that. I didn't want it to be up to me. I wanted it to be something that could be solved by looking outside of myself.
I get it. I
Yeah,
get it. Yes.
even though I knew it wasn't the case.
It's that ultimate lesson in surrender. And that, yes, I totally get that. And a
Right. And
lot of,
so I
go
was just
ahead.
going to say, because I was, because we were raised by such spiritual parents, I think people think that, well, you must have it all figured out, or you must, really know what you're doing, or you couldn't have any problems. And it's like, no, wait a minute. I knew these lessons on paper. I couldn't apply it to myself for years,
Yeah.
even though I knew better.
As Sage, you were speaking about, your father said, look at where the resistance is
Right.
and pay attention to that. In the book, in The Knowing, you say the phrase, become a host to miracles instead of a hostage to circumstances. And that's the same philosophy, is if you can, and a lot of people are in a lot of survival right now because there's so much uncertainty in our world of on and off again with these closures and this virus. And there's a lot that has become unraveled. A lot that's been changed that will never go back to the way that it was. And as we struggle through that, so much easier to look at it, instead of going through it with so much resistance and resistance and resistance, to start to surrender to what is. Surrender to change, as hard as it is,
Yeah.
and surrender
when you
to
flow.
that, to miracles, though.
That's
right.
when the
That next level
miracles show
in.
up. Yeah.
Right.
If you're constantly resisting and looking for the miracle in the package that you want it to be in, you might miss the miracle that's right in front of your face. I mean, and that's very often easier said than done. When you're in something that's tough, it's hard to correct yourself and bring yourself back. But just having the awareness that you can, I think, is the best first step. That the way you feel right now is a choice that you can make to change the way that you're looking at your own circumstances, and to bring whatever it is that you're wanting into your life, just to be open to it coming in a different form. It doesn't always come, you ask for something. And Serena has a great story that she tells sometimes about the raft and the.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll tell that too. But what I was going to say to that is that, my dad used to always quote Herman Melville and Moby Dick, and this line about the insular Tahiti, how so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but surrounded by all the horrors of the half-lived life. And I've heard him quote that so many times that I know it off the top of my head. So I had this idea when everything in my life fell apart that so for me, I call it my inner Maui, because Maui is my Tahiti, it's my paradise. And I would constantly think, when I'm on Maui, or when I can go to Maui, or when I get back to being on Maui, then I will. And I had such a profound experience on one of the anniversaries of him passing, where I felt him in the car with me say to me, find your inner Maui, find your inner Tahiti, come from there, and then you will find yourself on your Maui, on your Tahiti. You have to come from inside first. And so I started to do that through the process of writing. But the thing that Sage was saying about the raft story was this man who was drowning, and he's in the water, and he says, like, dear God, I'm your faithful servant. I never missed a day of church. Can you please send me some help? And a piece of driftwood goes by, and he ignores it. And he says, please, God, please, I'm really drowning now. I need your help. And a life raft comes up, and again, he ignores it. Third time, a man comes up on a fishing vessel and says, come on, get in, I'll give you a hand. And he said, no, I'm waiting for God. And then the man drowns. And he gets to heaven, and he says, God, what happened? I'm your faithful servant. Why did you let me die? And he said, well, what the hell do you think the driftwood and the life raft and the fishermen were? In other words, what I was doing for a very long time was I was resisting my circumstances, totally not willing to surrender to what was, and really becoming like the victim, viewing myself as a victim of unfair circumstances. But I'm often asked, what is it like to grow up in a household with Wayne Dyer as your parent? And one of the things I say all the time is that the brilliant part of being raised by spiritual parents is that you're taught from a young age to take responsibility for everything that shows up in your life. And that is where your freedom and your power, your true freedom and your true power come from. The downside of being raised with spiritual parents is that you're taught to take responsibility for everything, because sometimes you just want to be the victim. You know, you want it to be your boyfriend's fault or your teacher's fault or your mother-in-law's doing or your genetics.
No, our dad always said there are no justified resentments. So if I came home from school complaining about my teacher, no. What did you do to bring this situation upon yourself? What's your role in this relationship that you have formed with your teacher? You know, there are no justified resentments. When you find yourself blaming someone else, you're not getting to the bottom of it. You're not getting to the answer.
The downside of that whole experience for me was that what really compounded the depression, if you will, was that because I was raised to understand that you don't get in life what you want, you get what you are. When all of these bad things were happening, I really thought that I must be bad, that I must have karmically done something, that I must be just not a good person for all of these bad things to keep happening in my life, because I was somehow attracting them or aligning with them. And I didn't have my dad here to help me understand that. So I think I had shame, and then I had compounded shame because I felt like I had done something to bring it all on. What I have come to know since writing this book, and through the process actually of writing this book, was that, you know, in the poem that we included in the book, where Rumi writes that at each of our births, there's a ladder placed before us, and each rung we climb is a rung toward enlightenment. I can now honestly tell you that every single one of those bad experiences that happened in my life were the stepping stones. The stepping stones, the greatest teachers, the most profound gifts, and that I was viewing them as bad from my limited human viewpoint. But when I was able to connect with this understanding or this idea that we come here to grow, and you don't grow by not getting challenged. And maybe I went through so much of this because I needed to understand that I had within me the ability to get through it, and then to share about that.
Yes.
So that's all I wanted to say about that.
No, it's a very, very important lesson, because our daughter raised by spiritual parents, what do I do for a living? and we have taught her through our experience that every experience, there are no such things accidents, and that you can learn from every experience. So she got in an accident, a physical accident, where she was on her bike in the middle. She's a triathlete, and she looked down for a second and didn't see that a car had pulled off the freeway, a truck, and she slammed her body into the back of that truck going 25 miles an hour. Now, how could she possibly, and she asked as she was broken and bruised, and, how could this be not an accident, Mom? And for weeks, and I was struggling with it too. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. This is clearly an accident. This definitely was so unexpected. And as the time went on, and we connected with a few friends and incredible spiritual teachers, somehow her soul had created that experience to find what it really felt like to be loved by her friends.
Wow.
Who she thought didn't care, who she thought was all about the facade. And she never, ever felt connected to, she felt very alone kind of through high school. They reached out to her in the most incredible, loving ways. And people she didn't even know reached out to her. And she really experienced what her soul got was just the love that she felt from people were so enormous. She couldn't have gotten that experience any other way. And somehow our souls create these weird experiences to really take us to the extreme, to show us what it is that we're deeply not even knowing that we're looking for. But back to your piece about what you were saying, Serena, about that inner peace, that inner Maui. I had this experience, and maybe you two can illuminate this for me, because it was a dream that I had when recently, after your father had passed. I remember one morning, and it was like a twilight, sleep wake up thing, and I asked in my heart of hearts, where did you go? If you were in this incredible spiritual enlightenment, where did you go? And I fell back asleep, and I felt this incredible experience of literally being the molecule of water inside of a sunset.
Wow.
And what it felt to reflect the sun's rays on me as a molecule, and the colors that illuminated from my being as a molecule, and what it feels like to reflect light. And I kept getting this word refractions, refractions. I have no idea what that meant, or what. Still don't know. Does that mean anything to you?
I mean, I don't know what that means, but for you, but I could say a few things about it. One, I think that when we're in a dream state, we're not limited by our bodies and by our egos the way that we are when we are awake. So your mind is able to run wild with its imagination. And our dad loved to say, knowledge is one thing, but your imagination is your power. That is, anything that you can imagine is what you can bring into this world. So cultivate your imagination, imagine what you want. And I think when we're dreaming, like I said, it's able to just run wild. And to say that that you're experiencing light, that is what we are when we leave these bodies. I believe we are light. Our dad loved that song, I Am Light, I Am Light.
Yes.
The song that just repeated, I am light. And sometimes I say that when I meditate. If I am unable to hone in my thoughts and my mind's running wild, I just repeat the mantra, I am light, I am light. Because I believe that's what we are. When we leave these bodies, we are all light. We are love. Light is energy.
I have chills everywhere. Yes. Yes.
And also, oh, go ahead.
When you go into the physical state, the energy is slowed way down, as opposed to light is spinning and moving so fast. Just from a scientific point of view, these are facts. The physical state is a slowed down energy state. Light, gas, all of that, it's much faster energy. And that it goes back to what we were saying before. If you want to, when we leave these bodies, we're no longer restricted by the physical laws that dictate our world. Just physics, basic physics, that you're slowed down in the physical state. And when you're able to expand this way, you can be, because I believe that my dad and all of our loved ones, they can be everywhere. Just like light, it can be everywhere.
Like the
traveling
rays of the
at
sunset.
Yeah, it's lighting up half the world as we speak, and the other half it'll be doing it in a few hours. It can be everywhere. And I believe that's how our loved ones are.
And just to add to that a little bit, our friend Dee, our dad's assistant, when we got to Maui the first week after our dad passed away, she has a little boy, Marcus, who at the time was like 2.5. And he had spent every morning of his life, basically, that my dad was on Maui, with my dad, because Dee would come over and, kind of take care of the place and bring him a green smoothie and all these different things. And she would bring her little boy, Marcus. So my dad and Marcus loved each other. And when we got to Maui the first week after he passed away, she told us how she had given Marcus a box of crayons, a big box of like 64 crayons. And when he opened it, he said, "Look, Mommy, Wayne's colors." And she said, what are Wayne's colors? And he said, all the colors. That's Wayne. Wayne looks like this now. So he was saying that Wayne looked like a whole box of colors. Yes. And I think that what you were saying with, you were reflecting that colorful, bright, beautiful sunset light. I do believe that he comes in that form of a million different colors, and that we all do.
Yes.
And when you first said that, when you said, you asked him, where is he? The first thought I had was, and I haven't thought of this in so long, but he used to say all the time that we go from nowhere to now here. It's just a matter of spacing. We go from nowhere, so it's Nowhere to Nowhere. That we go from nowhere. We're just, we're never in the moment. We're never here. And when you said that, I immediately thought of that. He went from nowhere, which was his limited space, his limited body space, to everywhere, to now here all the time, constantly, without the limitation of a clock, a body, a wall, time, all of those things. It's like that was the first thing I thought, was that he's just now here, always.
Now here. And he loved presence so much, and light so much. And whenever I look at the colors of a sunset or a sunrise, I think about the refractions of light, and that all of our loved ones can transcend into this ever-present light. And speaking of time going by fast, my goodness, we are at our time here, and it has been so much fun connecting to you. I have really, really enjoyed this, and I've always wanted to do this. I just didn't want to impose after, and I know so many people did. And
no, we are thrilled to talk to you, and we know how much our
you.
dad loved you and thought highly of you, and he would say, Lisa Garr is calling, she's in LA, I gotta take this, or he would just have his funny things, and I remember all of those about you. So connecting with you is a gift for us, truly.
It is. It's been so wonderful, and I feel his presence here with us, and this love that we have is emanating to all of the people watching and listening to this over time. And it'll be on our podcast too. So if you want to check out the Aware Show podcast, you can share with friends and share this emanating love that Serena and Sage and Wayne and all of us share. So thank you so much. The book is called The Knowing. And I read it in just a heartbeat, because I was so enthralled with the stories, and the teachings are beautiful. So thank you both so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Until next time, everyone, I invite you to stay aware.